The arena goes silent. Every single person in that academy stadium is staring at me like I'm already dead. Because I am about to be. An S-rank noble twice my level has his summons claws an inch from my throat, and the only weapon I have left is a familiar so weak the crowd laughed when it appeared. So I do the one thing nobody expects. I command my trash summon to fuse with me mid-fight. Everyone thinks fusion at my rank is suicide. It should have killed me on the spot. Instead, something inside me cracks open, and for the first time since I woke up in this world, I feel actual power. But to understand how a nobody like me ended up seconds from death in front of the entire Ashvale Academy, you need to go back to the moment I stopped being human. Not stopped breathing. Stopped being who I was. My name is Dorian Voss. Back home, I wasn't anything special. No girlfriend, no fame, no future anyone would brag about. What I had was one thing, games. I played on hardcore mode, permadeath, no save states, the kind where one mistake wipes 100 hours of progress. I was good at it, better than good. I understood systems the way other people understand faces. Stats, growth curves, hidden mechanics, exploits nobody else found. That obsession is the only reason I survived what happened next. I died. Simple as that. A truck, a crosswalk, a phone I shouldn't have been looking at. 1 second I'm annoyed about a red light, the next I'm standing in a white void listening to a voice that sounds bored out of its mind. It tells me I've been selected for reincarnation into a world called Virelon. Magic, monsters, kingdoms, the whole fantasy package. It tells me I'll be given a class. And here's the part that should have been amazing news. My class is Summoner. In every game I ever played, Summoner was the strongest late-game class in the right hands. Command an army, instead of swinging one sword. Multiply your power, instead of just leveling it. I actually laughed in that void. I thought I'd won the reincarnation lottery. I had no idea I'd just been cursed. The moment I opened my eyes in Virelon, I was 11 years old, standing in the assessment hall of Ashvale Academy, the most prestigious school for gifted spellcasters in the kingdom. Every child born with mana potential gets tested here. Stats get measured, classes get confirmed, and futures get decided in about 30 seconds. My turn came. The examiner, a sharp-faced instructor named Selwyn Thorne, pressed a crystal to my chest and read the results out loud for the entire hall to hear. Summoner class. Growth rating, F. The room actually laughed. Not politely, openly. F rank meant garbage. F rank meant a kid who'd spend 6 years in this academy getting bullied and then vanish into some forgettable life nobody remembers. What none of them knew, what even I didn't fully understand yet, was that my growth wasn't slow because I was weak. It was slow because my class had been misjudged from the very first second. See, in Virelon, growth types come in different shapes. Most people grow in a straight line, small steady gains every year. Mine wasn't a line, mine was compound. Every skill I trained grew at literally 1% the speed of a normal student's. 100 times slower. On paper, that reads as broken beyond repair. What the system didn't calculate is that compound growth doesn't stay small, it waits. It multiplies on itself. And once it crosses a threshold, it explodes past everyone who laughed at me on day one. I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew was I'd been placed in the lowest class in the entire academy, nicknamed by everyone as the Ash class, because that's apparently what you call the students who are expected to burn out. My homeroom had exactly 9 other kids in it, all of us wearing the same expression. Kids who'd already been told they didn't matter. That's where I met Cassian Reyes for the first time. Not in my class. Cassian didn't belong in Ash class. He was S rank, heir to one of the strongest noble bloodlines in the kingdom, and he made sure to walk past our classroom every single day, just to remind us where we stood. The first time he saw me, he didn't even bother learning my name. "You're the F rank," he said, like it was the only fact about me worth knowing. "Enjoy the 6 years. Try not to embarrass yourself too badly before they cut you loose." I should have said something. I didn't. What was the point? I was 11, alone in a body that wasn't mine, in a world I didn't understand, and the only thing keeping me from panicking was the fact that I actually knew how growth systems worked. I'd spent years of my old life min-maxing garbage-tier builds and turning them into monsters through pure grind. If anyone in this academy had the patience to survive 100 times slowdown, it was me. So while everyone else in Ash class gave up, I started grinding. My first summon came a week later, during our mandatory bonding ritual, where every student calls forth the spirit that will fight alongside them for the rest of their life. Most kids in the higher classes summoned wolves, hawks, even minor drakes. When my turn came, the circle lit up, the whole hall held its breath, and out of the light stepped a small fox-shaped spirit, barely the size of a house cat, with dull gray fur and eyes that looked half asleep. Somebody in the back row said, out loud, "That's it?" And the whole hall laughed again. I named her Ember, because it was the only warm thing about her. And the instructors filed her away as exactly what she looked like. A trash-tier familiar bonded to a trash-tier summoner. Perfect match, they said. Ash class special. What none of them bothered checking was her growth type. That night, I stayed in the academy library long after curfew, going through every book I could find on summon bonding, fusion theory, and mana compression. Most of it was written for students who'd never need it, because most students never had to fight for every inch of progress the way I did. I found a section on fusion, a forbidden adjacent technique where a summoner temporarily merges with their spirit to access a burst of combined power. It was labeled extremely dangerous, restricted to upperclassmen only, prone to backlash if attempted below a certain threshold. I read it 3 times. Then I decided I was going to learn it anyway, because rules written for normal students don't apply to someone who isn't growing normally. For the next year, while Cassian and the S-rank students trained in front of cheering crowds, I trained in an abandoned courtyard behind the dormitories with Ember, running drills nobody was watching. My stats crawled forward at a pace that would have broken anyone without my old life patience. A normal student gained a full skill rank in a season. I gained a fraction of a fraction. But I tracked every gain like I used to track frame data in a fighting game, because I knew something none of them did. Compound growth doesn't look like anything for a long time, and then it looks like everything at once. The turning point came during our first dungeon trial, a mandatory descent into the low deep, a monster-infested ruin beneath the academy where first years proved they could survive real combat. Most classes went in groups of 10 with an instructor supervising from a safe distance. Ash class got the worst schedule, the least supervision, and the lowest expectations. Nobody thought we'd find anything worth reporting. We found a nest of shade wolves 3 tiers above what first years were supposed to face. The instructor assigned to us panicked and pulled back to call for reinforcements, which left 10 terrified 11-year-olds alone, with 6 shade wolves closing in from every direction. That's when I understood something the exam hall never told anyone. Being F-rank doesn't mean you're weak. It means the system doesn't know how to measure you yet. I sent Ember in first. She wasn't strong enough to fight a shade wolf head-on. Not even close. But she was fast. And speed was the one stat that had actually leveled up from our secret courtyard drills. She darted between 2 wolves, drawing their attention, buying just enough time for me to remember every dungeon clearing trick I'd ever used in a hardcore run. Bait, kite, exploit terrain. Never fight fair when fair means dead. I lured 3 wolves into a collapsed stone archway and brought it down on them with a crude mana pulse I'd cobbled together from a beginner spell and pure desperation. It wasn't elegant. It worked. The other students stared at me like I'd grown a second head. One of them, a quiet girl named Sable who barely spoke to anyone, whispered, "How did you know how to do that?" I didn't have a good answer. "I've done this before," I said, which was true in a way none of them could understand. We survived, barely. And when the report reached the academy, something strange happened. Instead of praise, I got suspicion. An F-rank student improvising battlefield tactics that saved 9 lives didn't fit the story the instructors had already written about me. Selwyn Thorne called me into his office and studied me for a long, uncomfortable minute before saying, "Your growth rating says you shouldn't be capable of that." "Maybe the rating's wrong," I said. He didn't like that answer. Nobody in this world likes being told their measuring stick is broken. But he didn't have proof of anything except a survived dungeon run, so he let me go with a warning to not get lucky twice. I got lucky a lot more than twice over the next 2 years. Cassian noticed. Of course he noticed. Guys like him always notice the one person who refuses to disappear on schedule. He started showing up to our sparring exhibitions, the ones nobody from the S-rank classes ever bothered watching, just to watch me lose in front of an audience. And I did lose, over and over, because raw stats still mattered, and mine were still crawling forward at a snail's pace. But I noticed something he didn't. Every loss, I learned something. Every match, Ember got a fraction stronger. And fractions add up. The first time I actually beat someone above my rank, it wasn't Cassian. It was one of his friends, a C rank named Torin, who thought sparring against the Ash class reject would be an easy confidence boost before the mid-year tournament. He was wrong. I'd spent 4 months studying his fighting style from the sidelines, the way I used to study a boss pattern before ever stepping into the arena myself. When we fought, I already knew where he'd move before he moved there. Ember caught his summon in a pincer trap I'd rehearsed 100 times in that empty courtyard, and I closed it out with a spell that cost me almost everything I had. I won. In front of an audience that included, for the first time, Cassian himself. He didn't laugh that day. He just stared at me with an expression I hadn't seen on him before. Something between confusion and the first flicker of actual concern. That should have been a good moment. It wasn't. Not entirely. Because winning against Torin put a target on my back that Ash class had never carried before. The other S-rank students stopped ignoring me and started watching me, trying to figure out how a Growth F student had scraped together a win against someone 3 ranks above him. Rumors started. Some said I'd cheated. Some said Ember was actually a rare spirit in disguise. One rumor, the one that mattered most, reached a girl named Leora Ashwood. Leora was the kind of student the entire academy orbited around. Top of her class, daughter of a war hero mage, the kind of beauty and talent combination that made even instructors nervous around her. She'd never spoken to me once in 2 years. After the Torin match, she found me in the library and sat down across from me without asking permission. "You shouldn't have been able to win that fight," she said. Not as an insult, more like a puzzle she wanted solved. "Neither should you have been able to walk over here and act like we're friends," I said. Because 2 years of getting laughed at had at least taught me not to flinch anymore. She almost smiled. Almost. "Show me your fusion technique." I froze. Nobody was supposed to know I'd been secretly practicing fusion. It was restricted for a reason, and if the academy found out an F-rank student had been experimenting with a technique that could kill him if done wrong, they wouldn't call it initiative, they'd call it grounds for expulsion. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. "You do," she said. I watched the fight twice. There was a half second where your mana signature spiked past anything an F rank should generate. That's not a normal spell. That's a bond stabilizing mid-combat. She leaned in. "I want to see it done properly, or I'm telling Instructor Thorn what I saw." I had no choice. I told her everything. The fusion theory, the months of secret drills, the terrifying gap between what the technique promised and what would happen if I got it wrong. I expected her to report me anyway. Instead, she offered to help. That was the moment everything in Ash class started to change. Leora couldn't officially train an F-rank student without questions being asked, so we trained in secret, the same courtyard I'd used with Ember for 2 years, except now with someone who actually understood high-level mana theory, correcting every mistake I'd been making blind. Under her guidance, my crawling growth rate finally had direction instead of just desperation. And then, the mid-year tournament arrived. The one event where every class, every rank, faces off in front of the entire academy and half the kingdom's nobility watching from the stands. Ash class students were traditionally eliminated in the first round without ceremony. Nobody expected different this year. Nobody except me. My first match was against a low B rank, a fight I won through pure preparation, the same way I'd beaten Torin, studying every angle before ever stepping onto the field. My second match was harder, an A rank whose summon nearly ended things in the opening 30 seconds, and I only survived because Ember had grown enough over 2 years of grinding to take one real hit and keep fighting. The crowd, which had been laughing at my name in the program, went quiet after that match. Quiet is louder than laughing when you're the one they're staring at. My third match was against Cassian Reyes. He requested it personally. I found out later he'd pulled rank with the tournament officials just to make sure it happened, because as far as he was concerned, an F rank surviving this long was an insult to everything he'd worked for, and he intended to end it publicly. When we stepped into the arena, the entire stadium was packed. Every noble family, every instructor, Selwyn Thorn front row, with an expression I couldn't read. "You got lucky twice," Cassian said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "There's no luck left." He wasn't wrong about the gap between us. His summon was an S-rank Stormdrake, fast, brutal, trained by private tutors since he could walk. Ember was still, on paper, a trash-tier fox spirit. The math said, this fight should have lasted 10 seconds. It didn't, because I wasn't fighting the math. I was fighting the pattern, and patterns are the one thing 2 years of hardcore gaming had trained into my bones better than anything else in this world. I dodged the Drake's opening strike by a margin so thin the crowd gasped. I dodged the second by reading the wind shift half a beat before it moved. Cassian's confidence cracked, just slightly, and that crack was all the opening I needed. That's when I made the call that put me exactly where this whole story started. Cornered. Drake claws an inch from my throat. One option left that every rule in this academy said should kill me. Fusion. At a rank that hadn't earned the stability to survive it. I did it anyway. Ember's light poured into me, and for half a second the pain was unbearable, my mana pathways screaming under a pressure they weren't built for. Then something shifted. 2 years of compound growth, quiet and invisible, and mocked by every single person in that stadium, finally crossed the threshold it had been building toward the entire time. Power didn't trickle in, it detonated. My strength doubled, then doubled again. Faster than any spell I'd ever cast, faster than the system that rated me F could have predicted, because the system was built to measure straight lines, and I had never once been a straight line. I caught the Drake's claw bare-handed. The entire arena went dead silent. Cassian's face changed from arrogance to something close to fear, and for the first time in this world, someone looked at me the way I used to look at a boss I'd finally figured out how to beat. I threw the Drake back with strength that shouldn't have existed in my body 5 seconds earlier, and Cassian hit the arena wall hard enough to end the match on the spot. I won. The stadium didn't cheer right away. It took a few seconds for 4,000 people to process that the Ash class reject had just beaten the strongest S-rank student in the academy in front of his own bloodline. When the noise finally came, it wasn't polite applause. It was chaos, disbelief, half the crowd on their feet, instructors whispering to each other with expressions I'd never seen them wear around me before. Selwyn Thorne walked down to the arena floor himself. He looked at me for a long time before he spoke. Your rating is being reassessed, he said. Effective immediately. That should have felt like victory. It didn't. Not fully. Because standing in the wreckage of that arena, mana still burning through a body that had just crossed a threshold nobody accounted for, I felt something else beneath the crowd's noise. A presence. Distant, but watching, the kind of attention that doesn't belong to an academy stadium. I looked up toward the northern sky, and for one heartbeat, the clouds over the kingdom turned a shade of black that had no natural explanation. Leora grabbed my arm. You felt that too, she said, and it wasn't a question. What was it? I asked. She didn't answer right away, and when she finally did, her voice had lost every trace of the confidence I'd gotten used to. The wards on the northern border just spiked. That's not something that happens during a school tournament. Instructor Thorne's expression confirmed it before he said a single word. Reports were already arriving. Runners sprinting across the arena floor toward the officials' box. Panic spreading through the staff faster than the crowd even noticed. Whatever had just cracked open in the north wasn't a coincidence tied to my fight. It was something far bigger. Something that had been sleeping under the kingdom's oldest wards for longer than anyone in that stadium had been alive. And it had just woken up on the exact same day the system's measurement of me broke for the first time. Thorne turned back to me, and for the first time since the assessment hall 2 years ago, he looked genuinely uncertain. Every summoner in this academy is being called to emergency briefing, he said, including you, especially you. I didn't know yet what waited at that briefing. I didn't know that the black scar spreading across the northern sky belonged to something called the Hollow King, a demon lord sealed 3 centuries ago by a bloodline the kingdom thought had died out. I didn't know that my growth rating breaking wasn't an accident, that compound-type summoners had appeared exactly twice before in recorded history, both times right before the Hollow King's seal weakened. I didn't know any of that standing on that arena floor, with Ember curled exhausted against my leg, and the entire academy staring at me like I was either a miracle or a warning sign. All I knew was that 2 years of being laughed at, 2 years of grinding in an empty courtyard, while everyone else trained in front of cheering crowds, had just been the tutorial. The real difficulty setting was about to begin, and something ancient in the north had just felt me arrive. Cassian pulled himself off the arena wall, blood on his lip, staring at me with an expression that had completely rewritten every assumption he'd walked in with. "What are you?" he said quietly. Not as an insult this time. A real question. I didn't have an answer for him. I barely had one for myself. What I did have was a fox spirit who'd just proven the system wrong, a rival who no longer knew what to make of me, an ally who understood exactly how dangerous the power I'd unlocked actually was, and a kingdom about to learn that the demon lord sealed away for 300 years had just chosen this exact day to start breaking free. The instructors thought the tournament was the biggest event of the year. They had no idea it was only the beginning. The briefing hall was still half decorated with tournament banners when they marched every summoner above C rank inside. And somehow, despite everything the Academy had believed about me 2 hours earlier, I was on that list. I sat in the back row between Leora and a still-bruised Cassian, who hadn't said a single word to me since the arena, and watched Instructor Thorn unroll a map of the northern border that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. 300 years ago, he said, the kingdom's founding bloodline sealed an entity known as the Hollow King beneath the Greywatch Mountains. The seal has held through every war, every famine, every crisis this kingdom has faced. As of 40 minutes ago, it is no longer holding. The room went cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. A senior instructor near the front asked the obvious question, the one everyone wanted answered. Why now? Why today? Of all the days in 3 centuries. Thorn's eyes moved to me before he answered, and I felt every head in that room turn with his. Compound growth summoners have appeared exactly twice in recorded history. Both times, within days of their awakening, the seal weakened. We don't yet understand the connection. We intend to. I felt my stomach drop somewhere near my boots. Great. Just great. 2 years of being invisible, and the first day anyone finally saw me, I got blamed for waking up a demon lord. That's not fair, Leora said before I could, standing halfway out of her seat. He didn't do anything. His growth breaking isn't the same as... I'm not accusing him, Thorn said, cutting her off, though not unkindly. I'm telling you what the histories record. Correlation isn't proof, but it isn't nothing either. He turned back to the map. What matters now is that the Hollow King's forces have already begun moving. Scouts report shade-touched monsters crossing the Greywatch foothills, stronger and more coordinated than anything in the wild should be. This is not a random monster surge. Something, or someone, is directing them. He explained the plan in short, clipped sentences, the kind instructors use when they're trying not to sound as scared as they actually are. The Academy's senior summoners would be dispatched to reinforce the border garrisons. Underclassmen, myself included, would remain behind under heavier protection, while the kingdom decided how serious the threat actually was. It sounded, on paper, like the safe option. It didn't feel safe. It felt like being handed a countdown clock and told not to look at it. Cassian finally spoke as the briefing broke apart, and students filed toward the doors in uneasy clusters. You should have lost that fight, he said, not looking at me. I trained my entire life for this rank, and you beat me with 2 years and a fox nobody wanted. I didn't ask to be strong today, I said. I asked to survive yesterday. Today just happened. He almost smiled at that. The first real crack in 2 years of contempt. If the histories are right about you, he said, yesterday might matter more than either of us wants it to. That night, I couldn't sleep. Ember curled against my side in the dark, still recovering from the fusion that had nearly torn both of us apart hours earlier, and I stared at the ceiling running through everything Thorn hadn't said. A compound growth summoner appearing right before a demon lord's seal cracks isn't coincidence in any story I'd ever played. It's a trigger condition, a boss fight the game had been quietly building toward since the moment I opened my eyes in this world at 11 years old, wearing a rating that told everyone I didn't matter. Somewhere past midnight, a knock came at my door, too quiet for anyone but a summoner's spirit-sharp ears to catch. Leora stood in the hallway in a traveling cloak, a satchel already packed over her shoulder, and an expression that told me she hadn't slept either. They're sending the senior class to the border at dawn, she said. I'm not senior class. Neither are you, which means we're the only 2 people in this academy young enough to actually understand what a compound growth bond feels like from the inside, and old enough not to get benched for it. You want to sneak to a demon lord's war zone, I said. That's the plan. The plan, she said, is that whatever's happening to you isn't finished. You felt that presence in the arena. I felt it too. If the seal is breaking because of something connected to your class, hiding in a dormitory isn't going to stop it. It's going to leave you unprepared for whatever finds you next. She had a point I didn't want her to have. 2 years of grinding in secret had taught me one lesson above every other. Waiting for the world to hand you strength on its own schedule gets you killed. I'd rather run toward the threshold than get caught flat-footed when it inevitably found me anyway. If we do this, I said, we do it smart. No charging in blind. When have I ever been anything but smart? She said. And for the first time since the tournament, something that wasn't fear moved through my chest. Something closer to purpose. We left before sunrise, Ember tucked against my shoulder, still too drained to walk on her own. Cassian's warning, ringing in my head louder than I wanted to admit. Yesterday might matter more than either of us wants it to. I didn't know yet how right he was. I didn't know that the shade-touched monsters crossing the Greywatch foothills weren't just mindless beasts. That something with a voice and a memory and a very specific interest in me was waiting on the other side of that border. Patient in a way 300 years of imprisonment tends to make a person. All I knew, standing at the academy gates with the sky still bruised black in the north, was that the system had spent 2 years calling me a failure, that an entire kingdom's history books had just quietly put my name next to the words Demon Lord, and that whatever waited past those gates wasn't going to care that I'd only had my power for a single day. It was going to test it anyway, and somewhere beneath the Greywatch Mountains, something ancient finally opened its eyes and smiled, because after 300 years of silence, it had just felt exactly what it had been waiting for. Me. Blood in my mouth. That's the first thing I notice. The second thing is that my arm shouldn't still be attached to my body, not after taking a hit like that, and yet here it is, smoking, useless, but attached. Ember's light is pouring into me for the second time in an hour, and it feels less like power now, and more like someone reached into my chest and started rearranging things without asking permission first. 3 shade wolves circle us in perfect formation, not hunting pack instinct. Formation. Wolves don't flank like that. Wolves don't wait for a signal. Something out here is giving them one. Dorian. Leora's voice. Tight. Controlled. The kind of controlled that means she's one heartbeat from not being controlled at all. You said fusion twice in one day was fine. I said it should be fine. My legs are shaking. Great. Just great. Turns out should was doing a lot of work in that sentence. The lead wolf's eyes catch the torchlight from the garrison wall behind us, and for one wrong, impossible second, they don't look like animal eyes. They look like they're waiting for me to make a mistake so someone else can enjoy it. That's where this was always going to end up. But to understand how we got 3 shade wolves and a countdown clock, you have to go back to 3 days earlier, when leaving the academy still felt like the brave choice instead of the stupid one. Getting to the border took 3 days on foot, because sneaking 2 underage summoners out of an academy under lockdown means avoiding every road with a checkpoint on it. Leora knew the back routes. Of course she did. I was starting to learn that everything Leora knew, she knew for a reason she wasn't telling me yet. The Greywatch garrison came into view on the evening of the 3rd day, and it didn't look like the fortress I'd pictured. It looked tired. Half the outer wall was scaffolding and rush repairs, soldiers moving with the kind of speed that only shows up when everyone's already lost more than once. Smoke curled off the northern ridge in 3 separate places. Not campfire smoke, that's not from monsters, I said, watching it. Monsters don't burn things that neatly. Leora didn't answer right away. She'd been doing that a lot since the tournament, going quiet in exactly the spots where I expected her to explain something. No, she finally said. They don't. We were stopped at the gate by a garrison officer who looked at 2 academy uniforms covered in 3 days of road dust and clearly wanted to send us straight back the way we came. He would have too, if not for the man standing behind him, tall, gray at the temples, a summoner's mark burned into the back of his hand in a pattern I didn't recognize yet, but would come to hate soon enough. Let them through, the man said, before either of us had said a word. The officer bristled. Instructor Corvin. They're underclassmen. They shouldn't be. I said let them through. Corvin's eyes were already on me, and not in the curious, sizing up way most people looked at me lately. He looked at me like he already knew something and was checking to see if I matched it. The boy from the tournament. Word travels fast to a war zone. That should have felt like recognition. It felt like being cataloged. Inside, the garrison was worse than the outer wall suggested. Cots lined every hallway, A healer moved between them with the flat, efficient exhaustion of someone who'd stopped counting how many people they'd saved and started counting how many they hadn't. Nobody looked up when we walked past. Nobody had the energy to be curious about two new faces. "This is what the North actually looks like," Leora said quietly, and there was something in her voice I hadn't heard from her before. Not fear, familiarity. Like she'd walked through a hallway exactly like this one before, a long time ago, and it had never fully left her. I filed that away. I was starting to collect a lot of things about Leora that didn't add up to a normal noble daughter who happened to be good at magic. Corvin found us an hour later, in the mess hall, over bowls of something that was technically soup. He sat across from us without asking, the same way Leora had sat across from me in the library 2 years earlier, and I was starting to think that was just how powerful people in this world introduced themselves. No permission, just presence. "I want to see your fusion," he said to me. No preamble. "That's the second person to ask me that in a week," I said. "You're going to have to get in line." He didn't smile. "I'm not asking out of curiosity, Voss. I'm asking because I need to know if what I felt during your tournament match is what I think it was." He leaned forward, voice dropping. Compound resonance. That's a rare signature. Older than rare. I've felt it exactly once before, and it wasn't from a living person. The mess hall noise kept going around us. Soldiers eating, someone laughing too loud at something that wasn't funny. All of it a wall of sound that meant nobody else heard what he said next. It matched the signature bleeding out of the Greywatch seal. My spoon stopped halfway to my mouth. Leora went very still beside me, the kind of still that isn't calm. It's calculation. "You're saying I feel like a 300-year-old demon lord," I said, keeping my voice light, because the alternative was letting it shake. "I'm saying," Corvin said, "that someone above my rank is going to want to know that, and I'm required to report it." He said it plainly, not a threat, just a fact, delivered the way you'd tell someone it was going to rain. But I saw the exact moment Leora's jaw tightened, and I understood, before either of them said anything else, that this was the first thread of something much bigger than a battlefield report. "Then report it," I said, because pretending otherwise would have looked worse. "I don't have anything to hide. I don't even know what it means yet." "That," Corvin said, standing, "is exactly what worries me." He walked off toward the officers' quarters without another word, and I watched him go, feeling the exact same sensation I'd felt in Selwyn Thorne's office 2 years ago. The sensation of being a data point in someone else's investigation. Leora didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, quietly, not looking at me, "He's not wrong to report it, and he's not the only one watching for signatures like yours." "Meaning what?" She hesitated. That hesitation told me more than whatever she said next. "My family," she said, "has been fighting the Hollow King's cult for 6 generations, since before the current kingdom even existed in its current form. It's not something I talk about, because the people who know don't usually live comfortable lives afterward. I was raised to notice things other people miss. Resonance patterns, compound signatures, the exact thing Corvin just felt off you." She finally looked at me. "I didn't come to Ashvale by accident, Dorian. And I didn't sit down across from you in that library because of curiosity. The soup in front of me had gone cold. I barely noticed. So what was it?" I said. "Duty? Surveillance? Was I an assignment?" At first, she said it without flinching, and I respected that even while it stung. "You were a signature I was told to watch. Then you were a person I actually wanted to help." Both things are true. I need you to understand that before anything else happens out here, because I have a feeling things are about to move fast, and I'd rather you trust me with the truth than find out the hard way. I sat with that for longer than I probably should have. 2 years of being underestimated had taught me plenty of things, and one of them was that trust wasn't a switch you flipped, it was something you built one honest moment at a time. She'd just handed me an honest moment, ugly parts included. That counted for something. "Okay," I said finally. "Then start now." "Tell me what you actually know about what's happening out there," she told me. The shade-touched monsters weren't random. They were being organized by something the garrison scouts had started calling the Ashen Choir, coordinated packs that moved with tactical discipline no wild monster should have. 3 patrols had gone out in the last week. 2 had come back. The third simply hadn't. No bodies, no wreckage, nothing. Which in her family's experience meant something worse than death had happened to them. That's the part that should have kept me in the garrison, safe behind rushed scaffolding and tired soldiers. Instead, an hour after that conversation, an alarm bell started ringing across the compound, sharp and frantic, and every soldier in the mess hall was moving before the second toll finished. Third patrol's signal beacon just lit. Someone shouted from the doorway. They're alive. They're 2 miles out and they're not going to make it back on their own. I was moving before I decided to move. Ember, curled in my satchel, was already awake, already alert, the way she got right before things went wrong. Corvin caught my arm at the gate. This isn't an academy sparring match, Voss. You go out there, you follow orders, you don't improvise. With respect, I said. Improvising is the only reason I'm alive right now. He didn't have a good answer for that. He let go. Leora and I went with the response team. 6 garrison soldiers and 1 exhausted healer, moving fast through terrain that got wronger the further we went. Trees bent at angles that didn't match any wind pattern. The ground had a faint ash-gray tint to it that hadn't been there a week ago, according to the soldier walking point. Everything smelled like a fire that had already gone out, but refused to stop smoking. We found the 3rd patrol in a shallow ravine, 4 soldiers down, 2 still breathing, surrounded by a loose ring of shade wolves that weren't attacking. Just watching, waiting. That's not normal wolf behavior, Leora breathed. Nothing about tonight is normal, I said. Then the ring shifted, all at once, the same half-second turn, 6 creatures moving like 6 fingers on the same hand. That's when the coordination Corvin had warned us about stopped being a rumor and became a fact, standing 30 feet away with claws. The healer dropped low to reach the wounded. The soldiers formed up, and I did the thing I'd trained 2 years to be able to do, without hesitating, sending Ember forward to test the formation the way I used to test a boss's attack pattern before committing to a strategy. She lasted 4 seconds before 3 wolves broke off just for her. Not chasing prey, isolating a target. My stomach dropped. That wasn't animal instinct either. That was a decision. They're targeting the summon, I shouted. They know what she is. They know what you both are, Leora shot back, already moving, mana gathering around her hands, in a pattern I hadn't seen from her before. Controlled, old, the kind of technique that gets passed down instead of taught in a classroom. Get to her. I'll cover the soldiers. I didn't argue. I ran straight into the exact situation every academy instructor would have told me to avoid. 3 shade wolves converging on a fox spirit, too drained from 3 days of travel to fully defend herself, and I had exactly 1 option left that could close the gap in time. Fusion. I'd done it once, in a controlled arena, with instructors ready to intervene if it went wrong. Out here, there was no controlled version. There was just Ember's light tearing into me at full speed, my mana pathways screaming under pressure they hadn't recovered from 3 days earlier, and a pain that made the tournament version feel like a warning shot instead of the real thing. That's the moment this story caught up to itself. Blood in my mouth, my arms smoking but attached. 3 wolves circling in perfect, unnatural formation, and Leora's voice cutting through the noise telling me I'd said this would be fine. I said it should be fine, I said again, because apparently under pressure I repeat myself. Turns out should was doing a lot of work in that sentence. The lead wolf lunged first. I caught it wrong, too slow, fused strength or not, and its claws opened a line across my ribs that turned the whole world sideways for half a second. Pain like that isn't something you push through cleanly. It's something you survive by accident. Then Ember, drained as she was, did something she'd never done before. She didn't fight, she screamed. A sound that wasn't animal and wasn't quite spirit either, something older underneath both. And the wolf pinning me flinched back like it had been burned. That flinch was all I needed. I drove a fused strike into the wolf's flank hard enough to send it tumbling into the second one, disrupting the formation for exactly the half-second Leora's technique needed to land. Light erupted from her hands, old and heavy, and nothing like the tidy spellwork the academy taught, and the 3rd wolf went down mid-lunge like something had reached out of the ground and yanked it under. 2 down, 1 left, backing away now, no longer part of a coordinated formation, just an animal again, and animals run from things that hurt them. It ran. I didn't get to celebrate. The pain in my ribs finally caught up with everything else at once, and I went down hard. Fusion collapsing out of me in a wave that felt like every muscle in my body filing a complaint simultaneously. Ember collapsed against my chest, completely spent. Leora was at my side in a second, hands already glowing with healing mana that wasn't as refined as the garrison healers but was fast, which mattered more right now. You weren't supposed to fuse twice in 3 days, she said, voice tight with something between anger and fear. Not without recovery. That's exactly the backlash the old texts warn about. Didn't have a lot of other options, I managed. Kind of a recurring theme with me. She almost laughed. Almost. The soldiers had the 2 survivors stabilized and moving, the healer working fast, and for one strange, suspended moment, it felt like we'd actually won something clean for once. That's when the air changed. I felt it before I heard it. The same wrongness from the tournament. The same distant attention pressing down from somewhere that shouldn't have been able to reach this far. The ravine went quiet, in a way that had nothing to do with the wolves being gone. Even the fire smell in the air seemed to hold its breath. A figure stepped out of the tree line, where no figure should have been able to hide. Tall, wrapped in something that looked like shadow, but moved like fabric. Features hidden beneath a hood that seemed to swallow torchlight instead of reflecting it. Every soldier in that ravine froze. Leora's hand went instantly to the weapon at her hip. A general, she breathed, barely audible. That's not a shade wolf, Dorian. That's a general. The figure didn't look at the soldiers, didn't look at Leora. Its attention moved straight past all of them, straight past the wounded, straight past everything that should have mattered more in that moment, and landed on me like it had been waiting its whole existence for exactly this angle. Little thread, it said, and its voice didn't sound like it came from a mouth at all, more like it arrived directly inside my skull, cold and patient and delighted in a way that made my ribs hurt worse than the claw wound had. You've grown since the arena. He'll be pleased. I didn't move. Couldn't. Not with my body still shaking from the fusion collapse. Not with Ember unconscious against my chest. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt, which was the only small victory I had left in me. The general tilted its head, an almost curious gesture, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. You will, it said. Soon enough. He's been waiting 300 years to say your name properly, Kaelrend. The word hit me like a physical blow, foreign and ancient and somehow, impossibly, familiar in a way I couldn't explain. A name that belonged to me and had never once been mine, not in this life, not in the one before it. Leora went white. That's not possible, she whispered, and for the first time since I'd met her, she sounded genuinely, completely afraid. The general was already dissolving back into shadow, its work apparently done, its message apparently delivered, and its final words hung in the ravine air, long after the shape itself had vanished into the dark. Sleep well while you still can, it said. The Hollow King remembers everything, especially the ones he lost.